Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some places seem to have a lot more people carrying guns around than others? Is it just the laws, or is it something deeper in the culture of those places? Well, a fascinating new study is digging into just that. This research looks at whether states that don't require a permit to carry a gun in public actually have more people carrying guns and wanting to buy them, or if it's more about the overall vibe of the state itself. It's a really important question, especially with so many states changing their laws lately. So, how did these researchers figure this out? They did something pretty cool. They surveyed over 18,000 adults all across the United States. They asked them about whether they owned guns, if they carried them, how often, and if they were thinking about buying a gun in the future. Then they matched up the answers from people in different states with the gun carry laws in those states. They also looked at other stuff about each state, like how people voted in past elections, how much poverty there was, and how many people own guns in households. They did all this to try and untangle what is really going on. Let's dive into what they found. First, they looked at whether people in states without permit laws were more likely to own guns. And in the beginning, the numbers looked pretty clear. People in states where you didn't need a permit for concealed carry were much more likely to own a gun. Almost 80% more likely. This seemed to hold up even when they looked at things like crime rates, poverty, or the percentage of black residents in a state. But then, things got really interesting. When they started looking at broader state characteristics, the picture changed. When they accounted for how folks voted in the 2016 presidential election, specifically the percentage who voted for Trump, that strong connection between permitless carry laws and gun ownership just disappeared. It was like the initial finding just wasn't significant anymore. The same thing happened when they looked at the overall rate of household gun ownership in the state. This pattern kept showing up when they examined carrying behavior. Initially, people in permitless carry states were more likely to carry a gun outside their home. They saw this difference when they looked at whether people carried at all. But again, once they factored in the state's political leaning, like the Republican vote share or its general gun ownership culture, those differences between permitless and permit states basically vanished. It was as if the laws themselves weren't the main driver of the behavior. And it wasn't just about carrying when they asked everyone, owners and non-owners alike. If they planned to buy a gun in the next 6 months, they saw a similar trend. People in permitless states were more likely to say they intended to buy a gun. Again, this association weakened and ultimately disappeared when they considered the state's political leanings and its overall gun culture. They even tried to see if it mattered how long a state had had permitless carry laws. So, they split the permitless states into those that adopted the laws recently and those that had them for a long time. You might expect that states with these laws for decades would have a different pattern than brand new permitless states. But guess what? They found that both groups behaved pretty much the same way. And just like before, once they accounted for the state's political and gun culture context, the differences between these permitless states and permit-required states faded away. This really hammered home the idea that the laws themselves might not be the main story. So, what's the big takeaway here? The researchers suggest that the reason people in permitless carry states might own more guns, carry them more often, or be more likely to buy them isn't necessarily because of the permit laws themselves. Instead, it seems like these laws and these behaviors are both linked to the deeper characteristics of the state. Think of it like this. States that tend to be more politically conservative and have a strong gun-owning culture are more likely to pass permitless carry laws in the first place. And the people living in those states are already more likely to own guns and carry them. Not because the law changed, but because that's the environment they live in. The laws and the culture seem to grow from the same root. Now, it is important to remember that any study has its limits, because this was a survey, it's a snapshot in time. It can show us associations, like saying, these two things seem to go together. But it can't definitively prove that the permitless carry laws caused the increased gun ownership or carrying. It is possible that people who already have strong pro-gun beliefs are the ones who move to states that have permitless carry laws. The researchers themselves acknowledge that their cross-sectional design can't make absolute causal claims. Also, they used an online survey, which means people without internet access might not have been fully represented. But even with those limitations, this study offers a really valuable perspective. It suggests that if you want to influence firearm carrying and purchasing behaviors, just changing the permit laws might not be enough, especially in states where gun ownership and carrying are already deeply ingrained in the culture and politics. It means policymakers and researchers need to look at the whole picture, not just one law at a time. It's about understanding the entire political and cultural environment. Overall, this research shifts the focus. Instead of seeing permitless carry laws as independent drivers of behavior, it positions them as one part of a larger pro-gun environment. It's a subtle but important distinction that could have big implications for how we think about gun policy and public health. What do you guys think about these findings? Does it make sense that state culture might be more important than specific laws in some cases? Let me know in the comments below, and if you found this deep dive into the research interesting, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Rubin's Mind Lab for more science explained simply, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for watching.